Alright, check it out. I am on the road again. I tried to do like a live podcast last weekend and it didn't work out so well. Um the place that I was doing the live podcast flooded. I had to move it, and when I moved it, mic the mics were not synchronizing with the camera, and if I was using the camera, the mics wouldn't work, and if I was using the mics, the camera wouldn't work. So I got a little bit of software shit to figure out. But once I get all that figured out, I'll get back up. I actually like it where it's at more than I did where it was. But I'm sipping coffee, and I'm in Faribault, Minnesota, heading towards Iowa again. All right, so this one is going to be a little less genuine than the previous ones. I want to talk to you guys about shit that you see out here on the road. Um, and I'm going to name exactly what I've seen. Like a couple of them, the ones I can remember. And it's going to get pretty graphic, so if you're not into all that, or if you like watching train wrecks, then you'll enjoy this podcast. But since you have read the title and you clicked on it anyway, let's get into it. All right. So I can't remember the dates or anything, but I'll tell you, and it'll be obvious what season it was on this first one. I was driving along and was coming up through Wisconsin somewhere on 94, and I was getting ready to get off the interstate because it was so snowy, and you could barely see in front of you, and it got a little bit lighter before I pulled off, but it still was bad. The roads had been covered, hadn't been plowed. So getting ready to pull off there somewhere in Wisconsin. I was pulling off to the right off the off ramp, and as I put my blinker on, I happened to look over in the southbound lanes over there, and just hopping over the hill, it looks like they might have had a big traffic backup, and a SUV slammed on the brakes, and I guess he was able to stop, but the road was messed up just enough that the tractor behind him, semi behind him, couldn't stop. So if you could imagine what happens next, the semi somehow or another wound up with his steer tires on top of the SUV. Now that's not so bad as to what I see next. What I see next was a guy hanging out of the passenger or the driver window, and somebody had thrown a small tarp over him, to lessen the shock value, I would guess. But the guy was dead, obviously. But and I mean it had to have been about 10 minutes after it happened that I seen it. So that was the first one, and I pulled into that truck stop, and I had a nightmare about that, And then when you're out here on the road, sometimes you'll have bad nightmares. And I was telling Rebecca, my girl, about one of them that I've had a lot, which is how you have trailer drag when you turn with a semi. The trailer turns a little bit tighter than the semi does. So that's why we got to swing out wide. Well, I've always had like a fear of turning right onto an on-ramp, and on the right side of the on-ramp, the ditch drops off really low, and my trailer dragged off into that ditch over there, and it pulls the truck with it. I've had that dream a few times. I've also had a dream of, and this may be due to what. Yeah, I'll get into that. But I've also had a dream of like losing my brakes, going downhill, and that's one of those where you wake up and grab onto everything, and you're sweating. So I've had some pretty crazy dreams about truck driving, just because I mean, I used to do it a lot. Now I only do it 4 days a week, but I used to drive, maybe 5 days a week, sometimes out 2 weeks at a time, 3 weeks. Anyway, moving on. One of the things that did happen to me is there's a steering link that runs from the steering box to the actual axle down there. And that's what, when you turn your wheel turns. Now, I was driving along in Champaign, Illinois, at exit 234, I think it was, or some kind of sequence number right there, maybe 321 or something like that, 234, I believe it was. And I was driving along right there, and I just hit the smallest little bump, just a regular little bump in the road right after like a bridge, just a little bump. And I was on the phone with a friend, and I was driving along. And the truck was still driving fine, but that corrective steering you do, that little bump left and right when you're steering, it wasn't working. And I tried to bump it again, and the truck was kind of going towards the left lane. And I said, "What the fuck?" And my friend said, "What's going on, man?" I said, "I don't have any steering." And this asshole, he says, "Hey, call me back when you get it figured out." All right, I'll do that. So I got off the phone with him, and when your steering goes out, believe it or not, you have a little time to figure out what the fuck you're gonna do. So I was basically sitting there with no steering, and the truck was still driving straight, and it eased kind of to the left lane. There wasn't anybody around me. Well, there's people behind me, so I threw on my flashers. And obviously I took the cruise off, but I didn't hit the brakes. If you hit the brakes, you might have some crazy shit happen. So I put on my flashers, and it eased just a little bit over the dotted line into the left lane, and then it started easing back into the right lane, and I seen it cross over that solid white line in the right lane. And as soon as that happened, I eased on the brakes, and it snatched the steering back into the right lane, and then it started easing back over to the white line on the right. And as soon as it did that, I grabbed my armrest, and I grabbed the door armrest. And I didn't have the wheel, because the wheel didn't make no difference. And I just grabbed both of them, and I stomped the brakes. I had my seatbelt on. And believe it or not, when I stomped the brakes, those wheels stayed straight as they could, and the trailer was like easing back and forth. But it pulled me to a stop right here on the right side of the road, in emergency lane, just as perfect as it could. Now, I'm telling y'all, I had no steering. The steering wheel was going around in circles. It had it would go all the way around in circles. That steering link was dragging on the ground. And, man, you want to talk about people that didn't believe me? I had to take a picture of it. Those people at work were like, "That is not possible." And what it did was it wrung that nut off that holds that steering link on. And I almost died that day. I went to a therapist a couple of times about that, but eventually quit going. I manned up. But I was gonna sue Volvo. It's not like too much of a hassle. But let's see here. Hey, you wouldn't believe how stupid people are. I was driving along one time, and a guy come on the on-ramp while I was on the interstate. And let me explain something to y'all. If you are coming on the interstate and you are merging into a semi, you are the one that needs to get the fuck out of the way, not the semi. The semi is not a maneuverable machine. It is heading, it could be up to 80,000 pounds, heading in one linear direction. It cannot be wiggling all over the road. So when you see a semi, don't get your panties in a wad and be like, "Why isn't he moving out of the way?" Think logically and get the fuck out of his way. It is a semi. I don't care what your pride says. I don't care what you think the political view of it is. Oh, if you can't move, then you shouldn't be on the road. Let me tell you something. Go ahead, merge into him. See what happens to you. I guarantee you there won't nothing happen to that truck. Get the fuck out of the way and make sure you're looking when you merge onto the interstate. I had a guy that was driving one of them damn little Austin Powers cars, whatever they are. What are those fucking things? A Cooper? Mini Cooper? He was coming on and I wouldn't break my cruise, you know? I had somebody on the left of me, somebody in front of me, somebody behind me. He was coming on thinking he was going to merge into me. A little Mini Cooper. Boy, he got as close as he could to my truck. Swerved a little bit, you know, had a dramatic effect and had a little attitude and fell back finally and went behind me. Well, he comes up around me, gets in front of me, holds a middle finger out, and slams on the brakes in front of me. I didn't touch my brakes. I was about a cock hair away from touching that damn Mini Cooper. If I'd have touched that thing, he'd have been in a world of hurt. But yeah, go ahead and think that you're going to do something other than make a truck driver laugh by slamming on brakes in a mini car. I will hit you. I will hit you, and I'd possibly kill you. And will it be on my conscience? No, not at all. Not at all. If you're stupid enough to do some shit like that, pull out in front of a semi and slam on the brakes, what are you asking for? What are you assuming is going to happen? You got to be a dumb fuck. If you die from that, then you should have. That's good. That's part of evolution right there. Yeah, weed out the weak, or the weak-minded. Jesus Christ. Anyway, enough negativity. So, what else do we got here? I'm trying to remember some of the things that I've seen. I've seen semis, multiple semis, burned down on the side of the road because they, you know, went in and messed around with their electronics and stuff and tried to deck out their truck on their own. That's what I'm assuming. If you go in and there's a lot of electricity running through these trucks. And I mean a lot. We've got anywhere between 4 and 8 batteries sitting underneath our ass. You know, that's the kind of power we got running into these trucks. And they're car batteries. You know, some of them are interstate truck batteries. And they're just really powerful. So if you mess around with the electronics to try to make some lights and plug-ins and shit in your truck, there's a chance you might start a damn forest fire. But I've seen a lot of trucks burned down because of that. And you know, you don't want to be a part of that. Another thing I was going to tell y'all about that Rebecca just said to go ahead and do my best job telling y'all about is we all went kayaking / tubing. We had one kayak and like, let's see, 2, 3, 4 tubes, I think. Maybe more than that. Yeah, I think we have more than that. Yeah. Well, either way, we had a bunch of tubes, and you know, we were riding down the river, and suddenly it started raining. So okay, rain's not that bad. Well, then, you know, since it's got clouds over, it started getting a little cool, and everybody was getting cold, and the river was, you know, the trip was going to be too long for everybody to make it through comfortably. So we decided to get out, run over to the road, and run back to the truck. And Rebecca was going to take the kayak and all the tubes and ride on down the river and man it out, just so we can get all the equipment down there to the end. And apparently she run into all kind of problems with making it down that river with all them tubes behind her. So a couple of them got snagged on trees, and she had to paddle upstream and shit to get to them, and trying to do that along with being tied to the tubes, you have to turn around. It's just a mess. So we were all down there, you know, Ian and Carl, which are two of the guys that were with us, they did like a 2 mile run back to the trucks. And once they got the trucks, we drove down to the end of where we usually stop at the river. And we got there expecting Rebecca to be there before us. And we got there, and there's her car, and there's nothing else. Like, oh, shit. And we have no way of knowing if she went past and couldn't make it to the shore, or if she just wasn't there yet. So waited around, and waited around. So my ass got ate up by mosquitoes and all kinds of shit. And I think everybody had already left except for me and Ian. And I guess they were all going to look for her and everything like that. And she finally come right down the river, and she was like, oh my God, I got hung up on everything. But she made it down the river by herself with all them tubes and kayak. But that was kind of a little story that of not last weekend, but the weekend before. Or was it last weekend? I can't remember. I never get to remembering shit like that. But back to things that I've seen on the road. I was riding along one day, and there's a girl. I don't know, she's college aged, and she had like a red Jeep, and she had like a little luggage thing. I don't know if you ever seen them. They're like a rack that goes on the back of the Jeep that is down by the bumper, and you just set all your stuff on it and tie it all to it. She had one of those, and you could tell she had like college stuff, like, you know, whatever. So she was driving along, and she passed me right by the driver's window, and you know, I was cruising along. What I noticed was she was on her cell phone, and I kind of seen her swerve a little bit here and there, which is pretty normal nowadays for traffic. Somebody on a cell phone swerving and bullshitting. But so I didn't pay no attention to it, and then everything came to a stop. Like I said, you're not gonna want to hear some of this shit, but I looked off to the right whenever traffic backed up, and out there in the field there was a little red Jeep with that rack on the back of it and all of her shit all over the fucking place. And I mean, I don't know what happened to her. I know there was police and firemen and ambulance and all that shit. And you know, I mean, that's kind of shit you see out here. So be careful if you're texting and driving. I mean, I know everybody does it, but just try not to be that girl. I've seen people life flighted out. There was a car wreck where two cars had flipped over and looked like two turtles, you know, on their shells. And you know, you look, and then they had traffic stopped forever. And seen a chopper come in, pick somebody up. I don't know which car it was or who it was or anything like that, but that was right there at where 94 meets something going south. 94 and 39 maybe in Wisconsin. But and then that exact same spot now, that same damn spot. I was driving through there, and a car came from the left, merging into the V right there, whatever, where the two roads meet. And somebody, I looked in front of me, and traffic was splitting, you know, going around the middle lane because there was 3 lanes. And I was like, oh shit, what happened? And I got up there, and I was in the middle lane, and I had to obviously do the going around. What it was there was a Doberman Pinscher laying in that center lane. It had jumped out of one of their vehicles and been hit, I assume. But he was laying there and he was struggling to breathe and kicking and shit, and there was blood all over the damn road, and there's people on the side of the road, and I guess it was their dog, but they're all over there jumping and hysterical and crying and screaming, and I mean that was a sad sight to see right there, and what nothing nobody could do because nobody would stop, and I mean it was bad. There's one thing, man, this might sound fucked up. I don't know, judge me if you will, but seeing a person on the side of the road is one thing, but seeing a dog laying there that had been hit by a car, that's something that tears me up. I can't stand seeing that. That burned a spot in my memory. The dog ain't never trying to do nothing wrong, you know. But yeah, it's weird that those two things happen in the same spot. I'll tell you a good one though. I almost wish I had all of you guys in the truck with me to see this because I was proud of this moment. There's a little hill coming out of Nashville when you're going north on I believe it's 75 or 24 right there. Here's where you're going north, and I think it actually might be where 75 turns into 24 going north. But there's a hill coming out of Nashville either way. I mean, it's not a big one, but the tricky thing is there was ice and snow. But man, you should have seen it. It was like everybody was trying to get to the top, and there wasn't no lines or even proof that there was a road there. I mean, it was just, and I had experienced this in Kentucky the year before that, and my ass wound up sitting there for something like 30 hours in my truck, dead on the interstate. You know, they'll shut the interstate down when it gets bad enough, and they don't give a fuck who's on it. You know what I'm saying? And they'll ride through with their emergency trucks and give everybody water and shit like that. But when you're stuck, that's it, bro. When they shut that interstate down, you better not be on it. But luckily, I had all my waters in my truck. I had some extra food and kicked back, kind of relaxed in my semi for 30 hours. But so anyway, back to the Nashville story. Everybody was trying to get up that hill, and one truck had gotten like kind of diagonal in the road, and everybody was trying to get around him. Some people had slid off because we was going around him to the left, and his trailer was to the left, and his tractor was to the right, and everybody was trying to get around him because there was cars on each side of the road, spun out, flipped over. There was cars every fucking where. Like, somebody threw a bunch of banana peels on the road. But I just got me some new drives. These ones I have on it right now. Just got me some new drive tires. And, boy, I put that damn four-wheel drive on, or my interlock. And I started getting up a little bit of speed. This is kind of the short version because at first I pulled over to the right to try to stop. And I got to thinking about it. I was like, this ain't a good place to stop and try to wait it out because I'll start sliding down this fucking hill. Because I had some weight to me. So I pulled over and stopped, and once I started going again, it started spinning. And I was like, oh, shit. And if you start spinning when you're going uphill, you're going downhill. But so I kind of stopped, eased back a little bit so I wasn't on that slick spot, and I started easing forward, just enough to like I was just barely moving. And just easing it, and I started getting a little bit of speed, maybe 3-4 miles an hour. And I kind of got into it, and it started spinning a little bit, but then it caught a little traction, spun a little bit, and it started moving forward. Then I seen that diagonal truck up there, and everybody had already stopped, and I seen some tracks where somebody had made it around it. Boy, I gave it hell. I was like, I'm either going in the fucking ditch or I'm going around this son of a bitch. And I went up there, and I got over as far as I could, and I bet I was about to clip my damn mirror on his trailer over there. And I just barely got around him, and I knew I couldn't cut back, or otherwise my trailer was going to catch him. So I was kind of riding the ditch a little bit. And then when I see my trailer clear his trailer, I got back on the road, and I punched it. I was running 45 miles an hour through snow. All I could tell is where the top of the hill was. Like on the left side, there's a ditch, and on the right side, there's a ditch. long as I was in between the ditches, I was on the road. So I'm getting it, and I swear, it is 2 feet of snow. So, I mean, my truck, you don't know what the hell's going on down there. So, I was getting it, and I finally got to the top of the hill, and it just looked like a barren wasteland where like one or two people made it up. Everybody else was just fighting that hill right there. Man, it was beautiful. Once you got up to the top and you got up towards whatever it was next up there, right there at the Tennessee Kentucky line, then it cleared up a little bit, but there wasn't nobody around. It was all quiet and peaceful. It was nice. But yeah, you see some crazy shit. There's always something crazy going on. Hell, I got to I think it was Mille Lacs Lake or Mille Lacs, the town or whatever, to Minnesota. And I was driving by the lake, and two of the coolest things I ever seen happen that day. One, the ice had just started melting, so it pushed up a bunch of ice on top of itself and kept pushing it up on the shore. Every time a wave or a wind would blow, it would push one layer up and it would stick there, and then it would grab some more ice from the lake, and then it would push up on top of that ice until it had a giant just ice wall right there. It was the coolest thing ever. Drove down a little farther, and everybody was stopped. I said, what the hell? And I got up there, and crossing the road up there was an entire herd of I'd say probably about 60 deer were crossing the road. Just one at a time, crossing over, males, females, fawns, just crossing over. And once they all crossed, and everybody started going again. It's the weirdest thing ever. I've drove down all the way, the entire coast of Florida, from Tallahassee all the way down through, Tampa down there, and then down to Fort Myers, over to Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, all the way back up to, was it Daytona? No? Yeah, maybe. I don't know, I drove that whole coastline. And by coastline, I mean I could see the ocean near about the whole time I was down there, and there's some weird driving down there. I hate to be rude, but I got down towards, was it Tampa? No, Fort Myers? Nah, I ain't even gonna talk about that. That was weird. Y'all gotta understand that truck drivers can see in y'all's vehicles. And we don't do it to be creeps. We just do it because that's part of truck driving. You get entertained. Not only that, but you gotta look down and make sure people ain't doing something stupid, so you know that you gotta watch that person or whatever. But yeah, you see some weird shit in vehicles, and I ain't even gonna talk about that. I just feel weird talking about that. But yeah, Floridian people, that's some weird motherfuckers, boy. Anyway, so yeah, that's some of the things you see on the road. Not too long ago, I hauled a load of batteries for Facebook. I don't know, a lot of you seen that, but that's pretty cool. I mean, they got a high security there at Server X, I guess. That would be in somewhere in Iowa. Can't remember. Probably Google it. But yeah. So that's some of the horrors and some of the adventures I've seen probably within the last couple of years. I mean, I've seen a lot worse than that, but a lot of them I can't remember. If you guys enjoy this, give me a comment. Let me know, because I see how many people watch or listen to my shit, but I want some interaction. I want to see who's there. Who are you? Ha! All right. See you later.